I'm almost done marathoning Samurai Jack in preparation for the new season, and I'm very glad I got around to doing so. There are a lot of great episodes I missed over the years, and as many have pointed out, the show ages well. The older you get, the more you come to appreciate its artistic merits. However, I can't help but feel that many haven't quite picked up on its best elements. It's been 16 years, and within the American TV animation industry, the show is still in its own world as far as sheer expressionistic creativity and exhilarating emotional storytelling goes. At the same time, I'd say that some have taken influence from its not-so-great elements in a rather surface-level way. Jack has an extremely Japanese visual sense, with its use of abstract, emotionally driven artwork that values drawing things evocatively over drawing them quote-unquote correctly. Its biggest influence as far as drawing style goes is the 1963 Toei anime film Wanpaku no Oji Orochi Taiji, also known as The Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon. The geometric character art, the flatly designed and minimalist yet naturally colored and beautifully atmospheric backgrounds, the sense of sword-fighting action, it's quite safe to say that without Orochi Taiji, Jack would not exist. The most interesting backgrounds from both works have a very flat sense of construction, yet they evoke the beauty of real-world landscapes by making amazing use of varying color tones, masterful use of shapes, and believable texture work. Jack replicates this with some of the best use of digital brushes I've ever seen in a TV animated cartoon. As for the action, well, just look at the battle with the Fire God, a character that obviously played a massive influence in the creation of AHOY. They don't just look similar, they also behave similarly in combat. They're shapeshifters that multiply when cut in half. And if that wasn't enough, in Jack and the Zombies, Gendy made the influence as obvious as he could by practically replicating the start of the Fire God battle scene by scene, design by design. Susanoo's punchy, pose-to-pose sword motions mirror the similar animation found many times in Jack's own kinetic katana wielding. I truly believe this is one of the best TV animated series ever, but nonetheless, nothing is perfect, and there's nothing wrong with criticizing things that you love. This show's flaws come mainly from the character design. Now don't get me wrong, most of the humans, humanoids, and creatures have good designs, and quite a bunch of them are outright fantastic. You'll find characters that are majestic, mentally disturbed yet lovable, terrifyingly gross, attractive, mysterious, and otherworldly, or just straight up freaking badass. But then you have designs like, well, this guy. You can't make much of an artistic statement about a character when their shapes are this stiff and under-designed. I guess you could say it was intentional, that he was supposed to be a boring, archetypal cartoon scientist, but I don't think that makes for a stronger episode at all. The talking dogs at the beginning of the story were meant to be silly British stereotypes, but they were still characters. They had designs and animation and charm, and you cared for them, wanting to see them free just as much as Jack did. But with some of these more cliché and under-designed characters, the comedy and appeal just didn't click. This is a well-thought-out design with a lot of personality, and this just feels like a bunch of basic shapes jumbled together to form a barely alive automaton. Then some designs just feel too unintentionally silly and otherwise serious scenes, which is when it starts to show that Gendy, up to this point, had focused hugely on simpler drawn comedic cartoons. Some of the final animated versions of some scenes are also quite inferior to the original drawings. I'm not sure why this was the case, but at some point it feels like the animator was scared of drawing Goku to look as cartoony as he was in the storyboard, even though he's a shapeshifter, and it makes perfect sense for him to have bizarre facial shapes like this. In this drawing too, the storyboard flows much better as an individual pose where all the elements of the characters work together, while the animated version looks far more segmented. I'm nitpicking because I want to make sure that when artists are taking influence from Jack's many amazing qualities, they won't also adopt its mistakes. There are many other examples, perhaps even most, where the final version looks better than the storyboard, and where the Korean team did a wonderful job, often under the tutelage of some fantastic animation directors who were gratefully credited at the beginning of each episode and seem to have been in regular contact with the American team, which is why I suspect this show is far more interestingly animated than the typical TV show animated by Rough Draft. Noteworthy is the animation director Seong-chan Lee, whose episodes feature some background animation that's pretty elaborate for a Western TV action cartoon, and who animated the big climactic fight scene at the end of the well-known and universally beloved Frank Miller tribute episode Jack and the Spartans. This action sequence is one of the biggest highlights and also features some of the most anime-esque explosions in the show. Lee uses some subtly Yoshinori Kanada-inspired flourishes for some of his effects animation, but here it stops being subtle and becomes completely in your face. It really feels almost like you're watching a Japanese cartoon instead of an American one. Another animation standout for me, by two different animation directors, was Jack in Egypt. I love the scene where this column gets cut in half. Going frame by frame shows just how solid effects animation and things like debris can look in outsourced Korean animation, as long as the animators are guided in a way that treats them as more than just cogs in a machine. This action cartoon is driven by a very classic style of production that someone like John Kay would probably find very interesting if only he gave this series an honest try. Jack takes an approach to animated storytelling where there are no boring so-called cartoon writers who don't understand the first thing about drawing. Instead, the storyboarders are the writers. There are other shows that do this, but generally they will be far more talky. Instead, Jack is almost entirely about silent visual storytelling, with some episodes having a type of gravitas comparable to the serious chapters of Gone, a silent and atmosphere-driven manga by Masashi Tanaka, and that's a really positive comparison because Gone is a hugely underappreciated masterpiece. There is a kind of poetic beauty to episodes like Jack and the Monks, where a group of bizarre, otherworldly-looking old men guide a hopeless, frustrated Jack to the top of a mountain, telling him that if they reach the top, their spoils would be truth. Or the way Genji chose to visually portray the way in which Jack, after willfully blinding himself, taught himself to see in the dark. Or this amazing sequence in which Jack learns to control and subdue his inner hatred in a way that's so inventive, poetic, and beautiful, I can't even summarize it with words. I'd like to close this video off by saying that I wish more cartoons took this purely visually driven, atmospheric yet exciting approach. Animation producers all over the world are afraid of making children's cartoons with few words. The aforementioned manga Gone got a pure garbage anime adaptation where the hyper-detailed and naturalistic yet expressively cartoony artwork got replaced with a bunch of ugly, garish, baby-friendly CGI, and to add insult to injury, all of the animals talk! The trailer for Disney's Dinosaur impressed everyone with its minimalist, wordless storytelling and mind-blowing atmosphere, and yet the rest of the movie brought us such fully voiced zingers as the Love Monkey. Writers who can draw are completely fine in visual mediums as long as they truly understand the medium and its capabilities. Iki Kajiwara and Isao Takahata are legends, and the animation world would be far worse without them, but sometimes it's good to just let artists do their own thing. Around a decade ago, Bob Servo from Something Awful wrote a very hard-to-read satirical article mocking John Kricfalusi's approach to animation, sarcastically bringing up that paintings don't have words. Unintentionally, Bob made a great observation. There is nothing wrong with cartoons being moving paintings, and at its best, Samurai Jack gave us some of the most breathtaking moving paintings of all time. I'll see you guys next month when the new season comes out. I hope to God it'll be as awesome as the trailer made it look.